After news of my job loss, I informed my family that this year, extravagant gifts were beyond my means. "That's perfectly fine, Alara," they all chimed. Yet, at the grand Christmas feast, my daughter-in-law, Serafina, brazenly snatched the plate I was reaching for right from my grasp. "No tokens of generosity for us, no sustenance for you," she declared. My departure was immediate. The next morning, she awoke to a stark reminder of their precarious residency, delivered as a rather pointed holiday gift. It transpired that their landlord was, in fact, me. The serving dish was yanked from my outstretched hand with such speed I barely registered the indignity before it was complete. "No gifts for us, no food for you," Serafina repeated, her voice laced with a saccharine sweetness that deceived no one present. I stood there, in Liam's dining room, clutching an empty fork like a fool, while nearly 24 relatives collectively feigned blindness to Serafina Thorne's public humiliation of a woman of my advanced years, on Christmas Day no less. It was at that precise moment I decided Serafina Thorne was about to receive a vivid education on precisely whose roof sheltered her self-important little head. Let me rewind and explain how I arrived at that extraordinary moment, standing in a room brimming with people who ostensibly loved me, being treated as an unwelcome supplicant. 6 months prior, my existence was perfectly unremarkable. I held a senior analyst position at Atherton Financial, a career I'd nurtured for over a decade, enjoying a comfortable rhythm and the naive conviction that family ties were sacrosanct. Then corporate restructuring struck, and I became merely another statistic in the ranks of the newly jobless, carefully maintaining my public facade of financial distress. I informed Liam and Serafina of my redundancy. What I neglected to mention, of course, was my lifelong financial prudence. While they assumed I was struggling, I was, in fact, presiding over a discreetly managed portfolio that guaranteed my comfort for years to come. But a carefully constructed test prompted me to utter those fateful words. "I can't afford Christmas gifts this year." Their reaction was both swift and utterly predictable. "That's fine, Alara," Liam had said, patting my shoulder with the kind of patronizing reassurance one might offer a small child who'd dropped their confectionery. Serafina had nodded along, a thinly veiled delight dancing in her eyes, her smile far too expansive for genuine sympathy. The prospect of unburdened holiday spending, it seemed, was a welcome development. What they failed to grasp was that I was observing them, assessing whether their affection extended beyond material transactions, whether I mattered to them beyond what I could provide. The true measure of their regard for me was about to be laid bare. The holiday celebration, held this year on the 24th of December, commenced as expected. The dining room showcased Serafina's meticulously curated seasonal tableau, designed more for social media accolades than genuine warmth, complete with bespoke linens and strategically placed winter foliage. The extended family was there, Liam's extended kin, Serafina's immediate family, and their assorted relatives from distant cities. Everyone gathered around the imposing oak table that dominated the room. The table groaned under the weight of Serafina's elaborate, multi-day culinary creations. I'd been seated at the far end, naturally, the customary auxiliary seating, a position once occupied by the late Aunt Celeste. Not quite relegated to the children's table, but decidedly outside the inner circle where the important family members held court. I'd grown accustomed to my assigned role as an observer over the years, but tonight it stung differently. The lively chatter drifted over and past me, an invisible barrier separating me from the core of the celebration. Serafina's recent ascent at her PR agency, Liam's quarterly sales triumph, young Marcus's athletic prowess, and Clara's musical accolades, all wonderful achievements that I would have loved to celebrate with appropriate gifts had anyone deigned to inquire about my well-being or the potential improvement of my circumstances. But such inquiries were, of course, beyond their purview, born of an inconvenient truth they preferred to ignore. When Serafina began the ceremonial collection of dinnerware, I instinctively rose to offer assistance, a reflex from a lifetime of contributing. She met me at the threshold of the kitchen, an abrupt obstacle in my path, her demeanor one of practiced dismissiveness. "Oh, Alara," she stated, emphasizing my first name with a peculiar formality that had become her custom ever since news of my redundancy had permeated the family gossip mill. The polite directive to just sit and relax held a sharp, unspoken corollary. You're no longer valuable enough to contribute, so don't bother pretending." It was then that Serafina, with a flourish, made her pronouncement echoing the earlier snub. Dinner, of course, is reserved for those who've shown their commitment to the spirit of generosity this season. The silence that followed was so profound it seemed to swallow the festive music. Liam Thorne suddenly found his fingernails infinitely fascinating, meticulously examining them as if decoding an ancient riddle. What they couldn't possibly fathom was the intricate web of control I secretly maintained. Leaving their ostentatious abode required every fiber of my being, but I did so with a quiet dignity, refusing to grant Serafina the satisfaction of a slammed door. I simply retrieved my coat and handbag, offered a joyous Christmas to all, and stepped out into the biting December night. The frigid air was a stark, welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere I'd just departed. I idled in my car for precisely 3 minutes, allowing the engine to warm and my simmering indignation to solidify into a potent, actionable resolve. Then I drove to my modest dwelling on Willow Lane, poured a generous measure of Cabernet, and flipped open my laptop. It was high time my dear daughter-in-law understood the true nature of the power she'd been so carelessly challenging for the past 6 months. The digital portal for Solstice Property Management, my own discreet holding company, sprang to life with a familiar click, a testament to years of practiced online financial management. 11 active properties glowed on the screen, among them a charming colonial residence on Sycamore Drive. The tenant details were immediately accessible. Liam and Serafina Thorne, lease initiated 3 years prior, an immaculate payment history. Exemplary occupants, oblivious to the fact their landlord was the very impoverished mother-in-law they'd just summarily dismissed from their holiday table. You see, when Liam and Serafina embarked on finding their forever home, they had, unbeknownst to them, entered into a uniquely advantageous lease purchase agreement. I, as the discreet previous owner, operating through my corporate entity, had presented them with what appeared to be an impossibly generous arrangement. Attractively low monthly installments, unfailing property maintenance, and a landlord who maintained a respectful, almost invisible distance. They truly believed they'd stumbled upon a real estate anomaly, a stroke of cosmic luck. The true irony was that their benevolent benefactor was quietly underwriting a significant portion of their lavish lifestyle, all while I meticulously cultivated the public perception of my own financial precarity. Living in a functional but humble flat and ostentatiously clipping coupons. Each month they paid me roughly 60% of the actual market value of that house's rent. The substantial shortfall was absorbed by my own capital, a silent offering I had bestowed upon them for 3 years without a single murmur of appreciation. The poetic justice of it all was simply exquisite. While Serafina had condescendingly lectured me on fiscal prudence and unceremoniously barred me from the family meal, she was residing in a property I owned, benefiting from a remarkably subsidized rent I provided, and raising her children in rooms I had personally envisioned and decorated long before they ever took possession. I had specifically acquired that house with them in mind. When they expressed aspirations of moving into a superior school district plagued by concerns over mortgage qualifications, I had quietly secured the property through my LLC and ingeniously engineered their perfect solution. Liam was convinced he'd skillfully negotiated the deal himself through some fortuitous work contact. Serafina attributed their success to her own savvy house-hunting prowess. Neither harbored the slightest suspicion that every intricate detail had been meticulously choreographed by the very woman they now so casually perceived as an inconvenient financial drain. For 3 years, I had unwittingly played the role of their unseen patron, their quiet fairy godmother, and they had remained utterly oblivious. Yet the delicate balance of such fantastical arrangements is inherently fragile. With the same effortless grace with which I had manifested their housing aspirations, I possessed the power to shatter their comfortable illusion and introduce them to an unvarnished reality. The robust lease agreement contained all the requisite stipulations, clear renewal clauses, explicit provisions for rent adjustments, and meticulously defined property sale options. Everything was impeccably legal, comprehensively documented, and poised to facilitate an exceedingly illuminating conversation. I dedicated the remainder of that Christmas day to a painstaking review of every single document, every payment record, every enhancement I had personally funded for their residence. By evening, I possessed an irrefutable, crystal-clear panorama of the precise financial magnitude of my enduring generosity over the years, the substantial differential between their rent and the market value. The subsidy on their rent alone had amounted to well over $50,000. Factoring in the upgrades I'd personally funded, the ongoing maintenance, and the property taxes I discreetly handled, Liam and Serafina had, in essence, been sustained by my quiet philanthropy to the tune of almost $85,000, a colossal sum extended by the very woman they'd dismissed as too indigent to afford even a token holiday gift. The following morning, I contacted Beatrice Hayes at Meridian Holdings. "Elara," her voice chimed, radiating a familiar efficiency. "I trust your festivities were suitably restrained." Beatrice had been my trusted confidant and property steward for nearly 2 decades, privy to the labyrinthine intricacies of my real estate portfolio. She was adept at navigating my specific directives, especially my preference for discreet management. I concisely outlined my request: a comprehensive property inspection for Sycamore Drive, a thorough assessment of every detail, the works. And then, with a measured pause, I added, "Beatrice, I believe it's time Liam and Serafina met their true benefactor." Severing the call, I meticulously prepared for the ensuing confrontation. My finest cashmere coat, the exquisite leather satchel, and the heirloom sapphire earrings, subtly luxurious, perceptible only to a discerning eye, completed my ensemble. I then drove to the quiet cul-de-sac of Sycamore Drive, positioning my car discreetly across from the elegant colonial that was undeniably mine, awaiting Beatrice's arrival. Punctual to the second, Beatrice's sleek sedan glided to a halt at precisely 2 o'clock. She emerged, her posture impeccable, clipboard firmly in hand, her professional veneer unwavering. Yet, as our eyes met across the pavement, a flicker of shared understanding, a spark of anticipation passed between us. "Moment of truth, Elara?" she murmured as I approached. "More like 6 months in the making," I replied, a cool certainty in my tone. As we ascended the flagstone path, an almost visceral sensation of reclaiming my own domain settled over me, a profound, if peculiar, homecoming. Beatrice pressed the doorbell, and the silence that followed was charged with expectation. The door eventually swung inward to reveal Liam's disheveled visage, still bearing the faint shadow of morning stubble, and an expression that conveyed profound irritation at being disturbed. His annoyance curdled into utter bewilderment as his gaze settled on me, standing just behind Beatrice. "Mother? What on earth are you doing here?" Beatrice, ever the consummate professional, glided forward. "Mr. Thorne, I'm Beatrice Hayes, from Meridian Holdings. We have a scheduled property inspection for this afternoon. And this," she gestured subtly toward me, "is Elara Vance, the owner of this residence." The carefully constructed composure of Liam's face dissolved, leaving a pallid, incredulous mask. The true earthquake, however, was still rippling beneath the surface. As Liam finally processed Beatrice's pronouncement, I witnessed 4 decades of his carefully cultivated perceptions shatter, piece by excruciating piece. He remained frozen in the doorway, mouth agape, his bewildered gaze flitting between Beatrice and myself, as if we were communicating in some ancient, forgotten dialect. "Owner?" he stammered, his voice thin with disbelief. "That's impossible. My mother doesn't own property. She said she couldn't even afford presents for Christmas." Beatrice calmly consulted her tablet, her fingers moving with practiced grace. "Our records confirm that Solstice Property Management, LLC, has held title to this property since October 2021. Elara Vance is the sole proprietor of that entity." She extended a pristine business card. "Perhaps we could step inside to discuss this further. These inspections typically require around an hour." Liam stumbled backward, creating an awkward passage, and we stepped into what I still considered a cherished space. The foyer, with its sun-drenched cream walls and gleaming oak flooring, was precisely as I'd envisioned it during the extensive renovations I'd orchestrated before they took occupancy. "Serafina," Liam's voice, a raw, desperate croak, echoed through the entryway. "Can you just come out here for a moment?" She emerged from the kitchen dressed in designer activewear and an artfully disheveled topknot, a picture of curated casualness. Her expression, initially one of faint irritation at the interruption, hardened into wary apprehension as her eyes landed on Beatrice and then, unmistakably, on me. "What's all this about?" Serafina demanded, her tone clipped. "This is Beatrice Hayes from Meridian Holdings, darling," Liam began, his words faltering. "And apparently—" He trailed off, the implications clearly overwhelming his ability to articulate. "And apparently, I am your landlord," I concluded, my voice utterly devoid of emotion. "I own this house, Serafina. I have owned it since long before you ever set foot inside." The resulting silence was so profound that the stately grandfather clock in the sitting room seemed to amplify its rhythmic chimes, each tick a hammer blow against the stillness. Serafina's face cycled through a spectrum of disbelief, then dawning horror. Serafina's expression cycled through a spectrum of bewildered anger before settling on a stark, pale mask that mirrored the winter landscape outside. "That's utterly impossible," she finally asserted, her voice wavering despite her attempt at conviction. "You reside in that cramped apartment. You were let go from your position. You couldn't even afford tokens for Christmas." Each declaration sounded increasingly hollow, as if she were desperately attempting to convince herself rather than refute my statements. I deliberately unbuttoned my cashmere coat and draped it over the antique hall tree by the entrance, the very piece I had personally selected for that precise spot years ago. "I inhabit a practical apartment because that was my conscious decision," I clarified, my tone even. "I informed you I couldn't manage gifts this year because I needed to observe the significance that information held for both of you." Regarding the job loss, I offered a subtle shrug. That much is accurate. Summit Financial underwent a restructuring, and I was part of the realignment. But Serafina, my dear, I haven't been reliant on a salary for my livelihood in over 2 decades. Beatrice, meanwhile, was meticulously documenting everything on her tablet, capturing images of each room as we conversed. It was undoubtedly a legitimate inspection, yet I knew she was also creating an indelible record of this entire exchange for future legal reference. I don't understand," Liam interjected, and for the first time in what felt like months, his voice held the genuine confusion of my son, rather than the practiced geniality of a stranger. "Why didn't you disclose this to us? Why allow us to believe—" "Believe what?" I prompted gently, turning to face him. "That you were independent adults charting your own course in the world, that you had diligently worked to secure this magnificent home and skillfully negotiate this remarkably advantageous lease agreement, that your success was entirely self-made?" I smoothly transitioned into the living room, subtly noting the fresh throw pillows adorning the sofa, their hues perfectly complementing the sophisticated paint palette I had personally chosen. I found those to be rather charming illusions to sustain. Serafina trailed behind us, her movements sharp and laced with palpable agitation. "This is preposterous. You've been deliberately misleading us for years. Have I?" I paused, turning to meet her gaze directly. "When precisely did I deceive you, Serafina? Was it when you presumed my financial struggles and I refrained from correcting that assumption? Was it when you unilaterally decided I was no longer relevant enough to participate in family discussions and I offered no argument? Or perhaps when you treated me as a burden and I quietly embraced that prescribed role?" My voice remained perfectly level, conversational. "I believe what you're currently experiencing is the stark distinction between outright deception and simply not volunteering information that was, quite conspicuously, never requested." Liam slowly sank into his favorite armchair, the one with the worn leather where he always settled. "Good heavens, Mother. All this time we've been remitting rent to you, living in your house, and yesterday we—" He couldn't articulate the rest. "Yesterday, you collectively concluded that a woman who failed to provide sufficient financial value to your family didn't warrant Christmas dinner," I finished for him, the statement hanging in the air, a stark and undeniable truth. That, I found, was exceptionally illuminating. We proceeded systematically through the residence. The formal dining room, where the preceding day's humiliation had unfolded, now seemed to echo with silent judgment. The family room, complete with its bespoke entertainment center and elegant gas fireplace, each element meticulously chosen to forge the ideal family sanctuary for my son and his future children. As we ascended the staircase to the second floor, Liam finally regained a semblance of his voice. "Mother, I have to ask you something crucial, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "I have always been truthful with you, Liam," I responded without turning. "You simply haven't always posed the appropriate questions." Are we in trouble?" he stammered, clearly grappling with concepts that had never before pierced his carefully constructed worldview. "Are you going to—" He paused, unable to voice the unspoken fear. "Are you going to evict us?" I halted at the crest of the stairs and turned to regard him fully. My son, my only child, who had stood idly by yesterday as his wife publicly disparaged me before our entire assembled family. "That, my dear Liam," I stated calmly, "depends entirely on what transpires next." And it was at that precise juncture that Serafina committed the irrevocable error that would irrevocably shape everything that followed. "You cannot simply storm in here and threaten us," she exclaimed, her voice rapidly escalating with indignation. "We possess rights. We have been exemplary tenants. We've never missed a single payment, never created any issues. You cannot possibly evict us merely because you're upset about Christmas dinner." I offered her a gentle smile, the same placid, polite smile I had worn for years while she systematically diminished my presence in her family's sphere. "Oh, Serafina," I began, my voice retaining its unwavering composure. "You still don't grasp the fundamental truth, do you?" "What is it that I don't grasp?" she demanded. "You fail to comprehend that truly good tenants don't unilaterally ostracize the very individuals who quietly underwrite their comfort from family gatherings." We continued our ascent, arriving at the master suite, a space I had meticulously envisioned and curated. The walls, now a serene dove gray, had once taken me weeks to select, their subtle undertones shifting gracefully with the day's light, a deliberate choice to evoke tranquility. To stand there now, observing Serafina's sanctuary, the very space she had considered inviolable, being unveiled as my creation, filled me with a profound sense of validation. It wasn't about vengeance. It was simply about the undeniable weight of truth. "The ceiling fan, you know," I remarked, as Beatrice efficiently captured the room's details with her tablet, "was a special order. 6 weeks it took to arrive, but I felt the antique bronze finish perfectly complemented the subtle gray of the walls." Serafina's complexion fluctuated from a stark pallor to a crimson flush, then back again. She remained rooted beside the grand king-sized bed, a housewarming gesture from their invisible benefactor, as I calmly itemized the enhancements she'd enjoyed for 3 years, utterly oblivious to their origin. Liam collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. How long have you been orchestrating this?" he muttered, his voice muffled. "Orchestrating what, precisely?" I inquired, genuinely interested in his interpretation of events. This revelation, as he might call it, had been an unfolding, not a blueprint. Meanwhile, Beatrice had moved into the ensuite bathroom, meticulously documenting the pristine marble countertops and the luxurious rain shower system I had commissioned prior to their tenancy. Her composed professionalism anchored the moment, preventing it from spiraling into pure emotional chaos. "I wasn't orchestrating anything, Liam," I clarified. "I was simply hoping." I drifted towards the window, my gaze settling on the meticulously designed backyard, specifically the corner I had landscaped years ago for children's play equipment, now occupied by young Marcus's swing set. I was hoping that when life inevitably presented challenges, when my career path shifted, when apparent financial constraints arose, my family would meet those circumstances with genuine affection, not with a ledger sheet. "We did respond with love," Serafina interjected, though her voice held a noticeable tremor of uncertainty. "Did you, Serafina?" I countered, turning back to them. Because from my vantage point yesterday, love appeared remarkably similar to conditional acceptance, contingent upon a perceived financial contribution. Liam finally lifted his head, his eyes clouded. "That's not fair, Mother. We've always made an effort to include you." "Have you, Liam?" I asked, my tone softening just enough to invite introspection, yet firm enough to prevent evasion. Consider this. When was the last occasion you extended an invitation that wasn't predicated on my contribution, be it a dish for a potluck or an extra set of hands for an event? When was the last time you simply called to converse, free from any ulterior motive, any request for childcare or a favor to be rendered? The inspection concluded in the guest suite, the very room I had envisioned as my occasional sanctuary, a quiet retreat during babysitting stints or extended visits, a place where I had imagined myself spending holidays, close enough to offer comfort during a child's night terrors or to share in the morning's early excitement. Yet in all the years, I had never once been extended an invitation to stay overnight in what was, in every tangible sense, my own residence. Beatrice finalized her documentation, stowing her tablet neatly into her bespoke leather satchel. "Everything appears to be in excellent condition," she announced crisply. "I'll ensure the comprehensive report is delivered to you by tomorrow morning." "Thank you, Beatrice," I replied. "I'll see you out." At the threshold, Beatrice paused, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "Will there be any adjustments to the current arrangement, Alara?" I cast a glance towards the living room, where Liam and Serafina were engaged in a hushed, intense debate. "I'll inform you of my decision by the end of the week," I stated. Once Beatrice had departed, I re-entered the living room to find Liam and Serafina huddled together on the sofa, a clear indication they had reached a tentative conclusion during my brief absence. "Mother," Liam began, rising as I approached, "we need to have a serious discussion." "I'm listening," I affirmed. Serafina cleared her throat, her demeanor shifting into a practiced sincerity. "We want to express our profound regret for yesterday's events. It was entirely inappropriate, and we are truly sorry. The holiday stress simply overwhelmed us, and we, regrettably, displaced our frustrations onto you. It was an impeccably constructed apology, a masterpiece of conciliation, precisely the kind Serafina, in her PR role, was adept at deploying for damage control. But having endured countless of her corporate presentations, I recognized the precise cadences of a carefully calibrated narrative when it was directed at me. "Thank you for the apology," I acknowledged. I accepted it. The words hanging in the air, a fragile truce. A flicker of palpable relief crossed both their faces, swiftly followed by a renewed tension as I continued. "An apology," I stated, my gaze sweeping between them, "is an acknowledgement of the past. My interest, however, lies squarely with the future." Liam's brow furrowed, a faint echo of his usual self-assurance. "What exactly do you mean, Mother?" "I mean," I clarified, rising and moving to the center of the room, the very heart of the home I had so carefully conceived that yesterday peeled back a layer of our relationship, revealing something profoundly broken, something words alone cannot mend. You both made a collective judgment about my worth to this family, predicated entirely on a carefully crafted illusion of my financial state. My eyes lingered on the details of the room, the bespoke mantelpiece, the carefully chosen artwork, the plush rug underfoot, each item a testament to my personal vision, now a stage for their discomfort. This space, once envisioned as a vibrant hub for family memories, shared laughter, and genuine connection, became the scene of my dismissal, where I was treated as an unwelcome stranger. "We begin by confronting reality," I announced, my voice cutting through the stifling quiet. "This is my house. You reside here as my tenants. Our family relationship, for better or worse, exists entirely distinct from that business arrangement." Serafina's complexion, already pale, drained to an ashen shade. What does that imply?" she stammered. "It implies," I responded, retrieving my cashmere coat and leather satchel from the antique hall tree, "that loving family members and exemplary tenants occupy two entirely separate categories. Yesterday, you unequivocally failed to qualify for the former." I turned, heading towards the door. "Now, we shall observe which category you choose to prioritize moving forward." I was midway to the exit when Liam's desperate voice arrested my movement. "Mother, wait! Are you going to evict us?" My hand paused on the doorknob, my thoughts quickly assembling the most honest yet impactful response. "Liam," I said, without turning, I intend to do precisely what any prudent and self-respecting landlord would do upon discovering their tenants hold them in such blatant disregard. The wave of absolute panic that washed over their faces told me they had grasped my meaning with chilling clarity. What they didn't know, however, was that I still held one more revelation, poised to reshape their entire existence. The phone rang at 7:30 the following morning. Liam's voice, when I answered, was strained, meticulously careful, as though each word was a step across a minefield. "Mother, could we speak? Serafina and I were up all night discussing everything. We'd like to understand the situation more clearly." I was settled in my sunlit kitchen, sipping coffee and perusing the daily news, the picture of serene domesticity. Yet, less than 24 hours prior, I had detonated a calculated bombshell within the very foundations of my family's perceived reality. And now, we were all navigating the chaotic fallout. "What specifically would you like to understand, Liam?" I inquired, my tone calm. The financial arrangement," he fumbled. "How all of this works. Whether we—" He trailed off, wrestling with a vocabulary that had clearly never been part of his personal lexicon. "Whether we're about to lose our home. Come over this evening," I said simply. 7 o'clock, we'll talk." They arrived punctually at 7, both looking as if the past 24 hours had aged them a decade. Serafina clutched a manila folder to her chest like a talisman, and Liam's usual confident bearing had been replaced by a tentative humility. "Coffee?" I offered, gesturing them into my modest living room. "Please," Serafina replied, and I noted the unexpected vulnerability in her voice. As I went to prepare the coffee, their hushed tones drifted from the living room. Not the angry, defensive whispers of yesterday, but the subdued murmurs of individuals grappling with a problem far larger than their initial comprehension. I returned with 3 mugs, settling into my worn armchair. "You mentioned wanting to understand the situation," I began. "What precisely do you wish to know?" Liam carefully opened Serafina's folder, extracting several printed documents. "We looked up Solstice Property Management online," he stated, his voice tight. "The company owns 11 properties in Connecticut, all residential rentals. The total value is—" He swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the paper. "The total estimated value is over $4 million. 4.2, actually," I corrected smoothly, based on last year's assessments, though current market values would certainly place it higher. Serafina leaned forward, her eyes fixed on mine. "Ilara," she said, her voice dropping, "I need to ask you directly. Are you wealthy?" I considered her question. "Wealthy is a relative term, Serafina. Am I financially secure? Indisputably. Do I possess resources beyond what I could reasonably spend in my remaining years? Most likely. Have I consistently chosen a modest lifestyle by preference rather than by constraint? Absolutely. But why?" Liam interjected, his voice laced with genuine bewilderment. "Why live in this apartment when you could afford anything? Why I let you believe I was struggling? Because I needed to discern the true nature of your affection, unimpeded by any perceived benefit to yourselves. To witness who you truly were when you believed my well-being depended on your grace, rather than the other way around." Liam produced a final crumpled sheet from their dossier. "This is what we wanted to share, Mother," he began, his voice tight with an unfamiliar apprehension. "We reached out to a property agent this morning and obtained a valuation for our house. If we were to list it," he hesitated, the weight of the words clearly palpable, "we could acquire a more modest property outright and still retain a significant sum." I merely glanced at the documents, refraining from touching them. "That's a rather optimistic assessment, Liam," I observed, "but one cannot liquidate an asset they don't legally possess." He flinched, but pressed on. "We understand that, but you could sell it, and we could utilize our security deposit as a down payment for a different place." He exhaled slowly. "We are prepared to vacate the premises voluntarily if that is your desire. We simply require a reasonable time frame to secure suitable accommodation for Marcus and Clara." It was a surprisingly composed proposition, articulated with a newfound humility I hadn't anticipated. Yet it underscored their continued misapprehension of the true magnitude of their situation, the profound choice that lay before them. Before we delve into any prospective solutions, I interjected, there's another crucial facet of this arrangement that remains unrevealed. Serafina's complexion predictably blanched once more. I mused silently that this pallor had become her involuntary reaction to any unforeseen disclosure. When I acquired this property through Solstice Property Management, LLC, I explained, I meticulously structured the transaction as a lease-to-own agreement. You have, in fact, been steadily accruing equity with each monthly remittance, albeit at a reduced pace due to the significant rent subsidy you've enjoyed. Liam furrowed his brow, a flicker of hope perhaps in his eyes. What does that entail, precisely? I retrieved the original contract from my own folder, its pristine pages a stark contrast to their crumpled papers. It signifies that subsequent to 5 years of consistent payments and diligent property maintenance, you are afforded the exclusive option to purchase the residence for the outstanding balance. Considering your impeccable payment history and the present market valuation of the property, that remaining sum would be approximately $280,000. The subsequent silence was absolute, heavier than any before. $280,000? Serafina echoed, her voice barely a breath. For a house with a market value exceeding $500,000? For a house you've comfortably inhabited, diligently maintained, and treated as your undisputed domain for the past 3 years, I calmly clarified. Liam gazed at the contract as if its clauses were inscribed in an archaic script. You mean to say we could truly purchase our house for $280,000? Should you honor the full 5-year agreement, yes. You have 2 years remaining, I confirmed. Serafina's query was barely audible. But why? Why would you possibly do this? My gaze encompassed them both, the individuals who, only yesterday, had inflicted such profound emotional wounds, yet who now, with palpable effort, wrestled to comprehend a magnanimity they had never once acknowledged. Because I cherish my son, I stated simply, because I envisioned my grandchildren flourishing within the security and beauty of a permanent home. Liam now wept openly, silent tears tracing paths down his face as the sheer weight of my quiet benevolence finally registered, unmasking the hidden currents that had shaped his family's life. But it was Serafina who articulated the pivotal question, the one that severed the veneer of the past. What becomes of this now? She pressed, her voice raw. After yesterday, after every word and every action, what fate awaits this agreement? I carefully placed my coffee mug on the table and met her gaze directly. That, I replied, my voice steady, hinges entirely on the decisions you make from this moment forward. Then I laid out the stark choices before them. You have 2 paths, I declared, producing 2 distinct documents I had meticulously prepared that afternoon. Option 1, we dissolve the lease-to-own agreement with immediate effect. I will grant you 60 days to secure alternative accommodations, return your security deposit, and furnish you with positive landlord references. You will depart with an unblemished credit history and ample time to find a suitable residence for your family. Liam wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, visibly striving to process the practical implications. "And option 2?" he murmured. "Option 2," I continued, "is a renegotiation of this agreement, founded upon a newfound clarity in our relationship. You remain in the residence, continuing to build equity towards eventual ownership, but under fundamentally altered terms." Serafina leaned forward, her eyes locked onto mine, a desperate need for understanding in her posture. What precisely are these different terms? I unfolded the second document, placing it deliberately on the coffee table between us. Market rate rent, effective immediately. No more generous subsidies, no more unspoken patronage. You will compensate me precisely what this property is genuinely worth, and you secure the purchase option through your diligent efforts, not my continued benevolence. Serafina's breath hitched, a sharp audible intake of air. The figures laid bare on the page showed their residence commanded a market rent of $3,400 monthly, nearly double their current outlay. "That's utterly unfeasible," Liam choked out, his eyes wide as he absorbed the numbers. "We simply cannot manage that. My earnings, Serafina's income, the children's needs? He trailed off, his mind visibly racing with dire calculations. Then your path is option 1, I stated, my voice devoid of judgment. There is no dishonor in recognizing one's limits. You have, with my assistance, been operating beyond your true financial capacity. Now, you will find a dwelling that aligns with your actual means. Serafina, her professional instincts kicking in, meticulously scrutinized the document, her analytical mind undoubtedly dissecting every clause. And the equity we've accumulated? She probed. Do we forfeit that if we depart? No, I confirmed. Should you decide to relocate, I will acquire your accrued equity at its fair market valuation. Given your consistent payments and the current property assessment, that sum stands at roughly $47,000. Liam sank deeper into the armchair, shoulders slumped. So our choices are either to leave and drastically scale back our lifestyle, or remain and face an unrelenting struggle to meet payments we can barely sustain. Those are the immutable financial truths, I acknowledged, my gaze steady. However, there exists a third, equally critical component to both pathways, one entirely unrelated to monetary considerations. They both straightened, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and reluctant curiosity. If you opt to remain, I continued, if you commit to market rate payments and dedicate yourselves to earning this home through your own merits, then we simultaneously undertake the arduous yet vital task of reconstructing our family bond from its very foundations. No longer will there be careless oversights. No more will my acceptance be predicated upon what I can furnish. Serafina's voice, a mere whisper, broke the silence. What would that truly entail? It would entail respect, I articulated plainly. It would involve my inclusion in family deliberations that bear upon my life. It would manifest as a genuine recognition of my role as Marcus and 6-year-old Clara's grandmother, irrespective of my professional standing or my ability to offer lavish gifts. Liam's eyes welled anew, fresh tears carving paths down his face. This time I sensed they were born of a dawning comprehension rather than mere self-pity. Mother, he choked out, his voice thick, I truly never grasped it. I failed to see how we were diminishing you. I know you didn't, I responded, my tone softening fractionally. And that, paradoxically, was the deepest cut. It wasn't born of malice. No, it was something far more insidious, I continued. It was indifference. Serafina carefully set the contract onto the table, her gaze now unwavering on mine. If we select option 2, she stated, her voice steadying, if we commit to remaining and paying market rates, how do we genuinely demonstrate to you that we can evolve? It was a candid query, and I acknowledged the courage required to pose it. We begin with fundamental shifts, I proposed. Sunday meals to which I am invited because you genuinely desire my company, not merely because you require childcare. Holiday festivities where my physical presence carries more weight than any material presence I might bring. Liam slowly inclined his head, a gesture of profound assent. And if we falter, Liam added, his voice low, if we inadvertently revert to ingrained behaviors, then we confront it head-on, preventing years of unspoken resentment from accumulating. Indeed, I affirmed. I also accept my share of accountability in this, Liam. I should have articulated my feelings of exclusion long before now. Serafina remained silent for a prolonged moment, her eyes fixed on her clasped hands. When she eventually spoke, her voice had shed its protective layers, revealing a newfound vulnerability. I owe you an apology that extends far beyond the indignity of yesterday's dinner, she confessed. For years, I have perceived you as a threat. Rather than seeking wisdom from your experience, I have consistently pushed you away. It was, without question, the most unvarnished truth Serafina had ever uttered to me. I never harbored a desire to compete with you, I assured her. My sole wish was to champion you. Liam observed us, his gaze flitting back and forth as if witnessing a profound unveiling of interconnected lives. So what then? He questioned, his voice tinged with a fragile hope. What is our next course of action? I meticulously collected all the pertinent documents, returning them to the organized sanctuary of my folder. You will take these agreements home, I instructed, and engage in a thorough, private deliberation. Focus not merely on the financial ramifications, but on the fundamental essence of the family you aspire to forge moving forward. How much time do we have to deliberate? Serafina inquired. Take precisely the time you require, I replied. However, be unequivocally clear. Remaining in the residence without a newly formalized agreement is not a viable alternative. If you are unable to commit to the market rate rent by the 1st of January, then our path irrevocably leads to option 1. They rose from their seats, their movements marked by a somber, careful gravity, like individuals whose very ground beneath them had unexpectedly given way. Their entire worldview had been irrevocably altered in the span of 2 days. As they reached the exit, Liam hesitated, turning back to face me. "Mother," he began, his voice hoarse with raw emotion, If we can't meet these new terms, if we have to make the choice to leave, will you still be our family? Will you still be a part of Marcus and Clara's lives?" His question was a sharp, unexpected pang, laying bare the profound chasm in his understanding of what truly mattered. "Liam, my dear," I responded, my voice imbued with a newfound tenderness. "My affection for you and my grandchildren has never been tethered to a lease agreement or a financial ledger. My struggle wasn't for the title of landlord. It was always for the recognition of my enduring role as your mother and their grandmother." He simply nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, and together they stepped out into the night. Alone in the soft glow of my living room, I reflected on our exchange, on the monumental decision that now lay before them. A part of me yearned for them to remain, to courageously undertake the intricate labor of mending our strained family ties while simultaneously forging their financial autonomy. Yet more profoundly, I wished for their eventual choice, whatever it may be, to emerge from a place of unvarnished truth, rather than the comfortable deceptions they had long inhabited. The following morning, well before the day's usual clamor, my phone chimed precisely at 8. But the voice that greeted me was neither Liam's anxious tone nor Serafina's practiced sincerity. It belonged to a past I thought irrevocably sealed. "Ms. Vance," the voice began, crisp and professional, "this is Eleanor Finch from Atherton Financial. I'm contacting you regarding a pending settlement related to your recent departure." I gripped the receiver, a sudden jolt of confusion coursing through me. Atherton Financial, my former employer. I had received a standard severance package 6 months ago when the restructuring occurred. There was nothing left to discuss. "I apologize," I managed, sinking slowly into my kitchen chair. "A settlement." "The wrongful termination settlement, Ms. Vance," she clarified, the words landing like small, unexpected detonations. "Our legal department has been attempting to reach you for some time. There's a substantial payment awaiting your collection." My mind reeled. Wrongful termination? That was absurd. The corporate downsizing had been presented as a legitimate, if unfortunate, necessity. My role had simply been phased out. Eleanor's voice, however, held a new, cautious inflection. "Ma'am, I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding. Would you be available to meet with Mr. Wallace from our legal team this afternoon? He'd like to discuss the specifics of your departure directly." 2 hours hence, I found myself seated opposite Arthur Wallace, Atherton Financial's chief legal officer, in a hushed, paneled conference room permeated with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and aged leather. The man before me radiated discomfort, his gaze flitting nervously between the papers scattered on the table and some indeterminate point beyond my left shoulder. "Ms. Vance," Wallace began, his tone stiffly formal, "I'm going to be entirely forthright. A grave error was made." "What kind of error, Mr. Wallace?" I prompted, my voice betraying none of the disbelief churning within me. "Your termination," he continued, "was improperly executed. You were never intended to be part of the restructuring. In fact, your division was slated for significant expansion, and your position was specifically earmarked for promotion to lead investment strategist." I simply stared, the words failing to register. "That's preposterous," I finally managed. My former supervisor, Brenda Holloway, explicitly informed me my role was being eliminated. Wallace's discomfort deepened visibly. Ms. Holloway, he explained, submitted deliberately falsified documentation regarding the departmental restructuring. Her recommendation for your termination was, in fact, orchestrated to create an opening for her nephew's advancement. Our internal audit uncovered these egregious irregularities, and an immediate, comprehensive investigation was launched. The conference room seemed to momentarily spin. Are you telling me Brenda Holloway deliberately engineered my dismissal to install her nephew? I asked, the words sharp with disbelief. I am stating, Ms. Vance, Wallace corrected, his voice firm now, that Ms. Holloway has been dismissed for gross employment fraud. Atherton Financial is prepared to offer you a substantial settlement, along with immediate reinstatement to your rightful position. He slid a meticulously bound document across the polished surface of the table. The sum detailed within the settlement offer caused my eyes to widen in stunned disbelief. It was a figure well into 6 figures, easily surpassing 2 years of my previous earnings. And then there's the matter of your rightful position, Wallace continued, his tone regaining some of its corporate polish. The lead investment strategist role includes a 40% salary increase, a significant annual bonus structure, and a substantial signing incentive. Should you choose to accept, we could facilitate your return to work as early as next Monday. My gaze drifted over the crisp print of the documents, my mind abruptly shifting to Liam and Serafina, likely still at home, wrestling with the implications of my ultimatum, agonizing over contracts and a future they now perceived as teetering on a precipice. The bitter irony was not lost on me. For 6 long months, they had viewed me as a financially diminished burden, a convenient scapegoat for their own self-serving narratives, when in truth, I had been the unsuspecting casualty of a calculated deception. I have a question for you, Mr. Wallace, I finally said, the words carefully measured. Wallace, discomfort still etched on his face, admitted the irregularities had surfaced 6 weeks ago. The investigation and subsequent settlement offer requiring that precise duration to formalize. 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, Alara had meticulously performed the role of the financially diminished matriarch, gauging her family's true regard under the false pretense of hardship. All the while, the very narrative underpinning her elaborate test was crumbling, a corporate deceit meticulously unraveling behind the scenes. The universe, it seemed, reveled in a particularly sharp brand of irony. I will require ample time to process this, Alara stated, gathering the weighty documents. The journey home felt like navigating a dreamscape, the settlement papers beside her a tangible manifestation of cosmic jest. Every calculated step, every observed reaction, every dramatic disclosure of her discrete ownership had been built upon a foundation now revealed as utterly non-existent. A subtle vibration from her phone interrupted her thoughts. A message from Liam. Mother, may we convene tomorrow morning. Serafina and I have reached a unanimous decision. Alara stared at the glowing screen. She pictured their strained conversations, their frantic financial projections, the soul-searching they'd undoubtedly endured, all aimed at redefining their family's future, and all of it predicated on the belief that she was a woman brought low by fate, desperate to test their love. But that woman no longer existed. She was now a woman vindicated, offered a vast settlement and an elevated position. Her entire understanding of herself, her recent past, and her immediate future had been meticulously redrawn by a corporate lawyer in a sterile conference room. She called Liam directly. Mother, his voice, genuinely warm and free of its recent guardedness, answered. I know we planned for tomorrow, but Serafina and I couldn't wait. We've talked all night. We've decided we want to stay to pay the market rate. We want to earn this and earn your trust back. A wave of profound, unexpected guilt washed over Alara, eclipsing any flicker of triumph. This was precisely the outcome she had orchestrated, the ideal resolution to her painful experiment. Yet it now felt hollow, tainted by her own newly discovered truths. Liam, she began, her voice heavy with an emotion she hadn't anticipated. Before you commit to anything, there is something of paramount importance I must disclose. What is it? He pressed, a familiar note of apprehension returning to his tone. Alara's gaze drifted back to the staggering sum on the settlement papers, a figure that would redefine every parameter of their discussions. Can you and Serafina come over this evening instead? There's been a development that impacts everything we discussed. What kind of development? The kind that rewrites the very genesis of our recent conflicts, she replied softly. 2 hours later, Liam and Serafina once again sat in Alara's living room. This time, the atmosphere was markedly different. They sat closer, hands intertwined, an undeniable unity in their posture. They had arrived prepared for reconciliation, for the arduous work of rebuilding. Alara knew she was about to complicate that hard-won resolve with an even more profound, more disorienting truth. I received a call from Atherton Financial today, Alara began, carefully choosing her words to avoid overwhelming them with legal specifics. She then calmly recounted the wrongful termination, the fraudulent supervisor, the significant settlement, and the offer to reinstate her in a far more senior role. When she finished, the ensuing silence was absolute, a palpable void. "So your job loss," Liam articulated slowly, the words heavy with disbelief. "It was never real. You were the victim of a calculated deception. And the financial struggles, the whole reason for your test, it was all based on circumstances that weren't true," Serafina added, her voice a mere whisper of realization. "Precisely," Alara affirmed. "I've been playing the role of someone who needed to test your loyalty and compassion under duress, when in reality, I was the unsuspecting casualty of a corporate fraud." As Alara observed their faces, the complex interplay of dawning hope, profound confusion, and an emerging determined resolve, she knew their journey was far from over. This new truth was not an ending, but a new, unforeseen beginning. They still had critical choices to make, paths to forge, but this time those decisions would be rooted in an unvarnished reality, free from the shadows of her past deceptions or their own mistaken perceptions. The following morning brought another unexpected call, a voice that carried the crisp efficiency of a high-end service. "Ms. Vance," the caller began, "this is Patricia from Prestige Property Ventures. I'm contacting you regarding a rather unique proposition for your portfolio, specifically the colonial residence on Sycamore Drive. We have a buyer with an exceptional offer." Beatrice Hayes, my trusted property steward at Meridian Holdings, was on the line, her voice clipped with an urgency I'd never heard from her impeccably composed demeanor. "Alara, we have a significant situation. The Davies, neighbors to your Sycamore Drive property, contacted us this morning. There was a break-in last night, and they've noted suspicious activity around the house." I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart quickening. "A break-in? What kind?" Beatrice's explanation was precise. "Forced entry through the rear patio door. The local police were alerted, but the perpetrators were gone by the time officers arrived. Nothing appears to have been physically removed, but there are clear signs someone extensively searched through documents in Liam's home office." My blood ran cold, a familiar metallic taste rising in my throat. "Are Liam and Serafina all right? The children?" A pause, then, "They weren't home, Alara. According to the neighbors, they departed yesterday evening and haven't returned. I've tried reaching Liam, but his number routes directly to voicemail." I was already out of bed, pulling on the first clothes I could find. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive to Sycamore Drive felt impossibly long. 2 patrol cars already occupied the driveway when I pulled up. I identified myself to the officer at the door as the property owner and was promptly escorted inside to assess the damage. The back door frame was splintered, a crude testament to the force used to gain entry. In Liam's study, papers were strewn across the mahogany desk, drawers hung open at awkward angles, and the filing cabinet gaped like a surprised mouth. Yet the expensive laptop sat untouched, the high-end sound system undisturbed, and Marcus and Clara's scattered toys in the adjacent family room remained exactly as they'd been left. This was no random burglary. Detective Harding, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 40s, led me through the scene. "Whoever did this," she stated, "was looking for something very specific. Documents, I'd wager." She paused, her gaze probing. "Any thoughts on what someone might be after from your tenant's files, Ms. Vance?" My mind immediately flashed to the original lease-to-own agreement, the meticulously prepared renegotiation papers, the comprehensive financial documents that laid bare my concealed generosity. information detailing Solstice property management, the intricate ownership structure, the true value of their tenancy. Any of it could be damning in the wrong hands. Before I could elaborate, my phone vibrated. Liam. Mother? His voice was strained, edged with a fear that instantly cut through the tension of the room. Beatrice just told me about the break-in. Are you at the house? I'm here, with the police. Liam, where are you? Are you, Serafina, and the children safe? We're in a hotel in Hartford. We left last night after... He hesitated, and I could hear Serafina's hushed voice in the background. Mother, there's something we didn't mention yesterday. After you told us about the Atherton settlement, Serafina received a call. What kind of call? I pressed, acutely aware that Detective Harding was listening intently to my side of the conversation. Someone claiming to be from a law firm, Liam continued. They said they were investigating financial irregularities in property ownership transfers and specifically needed to speak with us about our rental agreement. What did you tell them? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Nothing. Serafina's voice cut in, stronger now. I thought it was incredibly suspicious timing, coming right after we'd just learned about your situation. So, we decided to pack some essentials and leave until we could figure out what was happening. Smart woman, that Serafina, I mused inwardly. Her background in PR had clearly honed her instincts for precisely timed irregularities. Liam, Serafina, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Do not return to the house until we understand the full scope of this. Detective Harding gestured for the phone. Mr. Thorne, this is Detective Harding with the Hartford Police. Can you describe the person who called you? I heard Liam put the call on speaker. It was a man, sounded very professional. He said he was from Sterling and Hayes Legal, representing an investigation into family asset appropriation cases. The detective and I exchanged a quick, loaded glance. Did he give you any specifics about this investigation? She inquired. Serafina's voice came through the phone clearly now. He mentioned Alara by name, said there were questions about whether she was using property ownership and structured agreements to financially manipulate family members. He wanted to meet with us to discuss our situation as potential victims. The pieces began to click together in my mind, and the picture they formed made my stomach clench with an icy dread. Detective, I said quietly, my gaze fixed on the ransacked office. I believe someone is attempting to seize my property. What makes you say that, Miss Vance? She asked, her pen poised over her notepad. I thought about the timing. The call to Serafina coming immediately after my disclosure about my own finances, and then the break-in. The chilling truth dawned on Alara. The recent break-in at her colonial residence, happening mere hours after Liam and Serafina had been informed about the Atherton settlement, was no random act. This was a targeted assault. Someone, she deduced, was orchestrating a calculated legal offensive, intent on portraying her as a matriarch, financially exploiting her own family through property manipulation. Detective Harding nodded grimly, her expression confirming Alara's worst fears. It's a disturbingly prevalent scam, Ms. Vance, she stated. They pinpoint older property owners, fabricate evidence of financial coercion, then leverage the legal system to compel property sales or transfers. Alara's phone remained connected to Liam and Serafina. Mother, Liam's voice crackled through the line, tight with alarm. How could anyone know about our precise situation? The property arrangements? The settlement in Hartford? That question, more than anything else, sent a cold tremor of true terror through Alara. I don't know, Liam, she admitted, her voice strained, but I need you to do something for me. I need you to call the legal department at Atherton Financial, not the number I gave you yesterday, but their official corporate line, and verify that the details of my settlement, the wrongful termination, are legitimate. Liam paused, a dawning horror in his silence. Oh God, he breathed. You think that call was fake too? I think, Alara replied, her gaze sweeping over the chaos of her son's office, that someone has been observing our family with meticulous attention. Detective Harding was already on her radio, requesting additional units and a specialized fraud investigation team. As Alara stood amidst the scattered papers, each one representing years of her careful planning and quiet generosity, she understood this wasn't merely about money. This was a deeply personal attack. Someone knew about the Christmas dinner, about the property agreements, about the intricate dynamics of her family. Intimate knowledge that allowed them to craft a scheme designed not just to defraud, but to tear them apart. The question then wasn't just how they knew, but who. The call to Atherton Financial confirmed Alara's darkest premonitions. The individual named Eleanor Finch did not exist. The legal department had no record of any wrongful termination investigation involving her case. The settlement offer that had seemed almost impossibly generous was precisely that, an elaborate, meticulously crafted lie. Alara sat in Liam's kitchen, the sterile hum of the police radio a counterpoint to the quiet sobs of her terrified grandchildren. She struggled to piece together the layers of such a sophisticated deception. The fake Atherton call had been timed with cruel precision, arriving just as Liam and Serafina were grappling with a monumental decision about their marriage and future. "Ms. Vance," Detective Harding said, her voice grave as she ended a call with the fraud unit, "we've traced the number that contacted you yesterday regarding the settlement. It was a burner phone, purchased with cash 2 weeks ago. Furthermore, the Sterling and Hayes legal firm that reached out to your family about property irregularities, it's entirely fictitious." Serafina clutched Marcus and 6-year-old Clara closer on the sofa, both children bewildered and frightened by the sudden upheaval and the police presence in their home. "I don't understand," Serafina whispered, her voice a thread of despair. "Why go to such elaborate lengths? What do they stand to gain from all this?" Detective Harding consulted her notes, her pen poised. Property fraud schemes like this typically unfold in stages. First, they destabilize a family through manufactured crises and perceived grievances. Then they position themselves as helpful legal advocates for the victims of financial abuse. Finally, they exploit the legal process to force property sales or transfers, benefiting from the chaos they've created. Liam, ever the engineer, resumed pacing, his mind visibly wrestling with the logistics. But how could they possess such intimate knowledge of our specific situation? They knew about Mother's job loss, about the property arrangements, even about the Christmas dinner incident. That was the question that had been gnawing at Alara since the very beginning. "I think," she began slowly, her gaze fixed on the detective, "that someone has been observing our family for months, perhaps even longer. Someone with a deep understanding of our vulnerabilities and our hidden assets. Who would do something like that?" Serafina asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Someone who was aware of my property investments," Alara mused, the pieces beginning to form a chilling mosaic. "Someone who understood that I had assets worth targeting and who knew where to look for the connections. Property records are public, of course, but the link between Solstice Property Management and my personal identity isn't immediately obvious unless you know precisely what you're searching for." Detective Harding was making diligent notes. "Who else knows about your holdings, Ms. Vance?" "My legal counsel, my financial advisor, the team at Solstice Property Management. And," she added, a sudden chilling realization dawning, "anyone who might have accessed my confidential files during my tenure at Atherton Financial." Liam's eyes widened. "Evelyn Croft," he murmured, the name a venomous whisper. "The supervisor who framed you. She'd have had unfettered access to your entire employment dossier, personal contacts, financial statements, everything." Detective Harding's pen stilled over her notepad. "Tell me about this Evelyn Croft." Alara calmly detailed the fabricated termination, the elaborate scheme Evelyn had orchestrated to elevate her own relative. As Alara spoke, the detective's expression hardened, shifting from concern to profoundly grave. "Ms. Vance," Detective Harding stated, her voice taut, "I need to make some immediate inquiries. Based on your account, Evelyn Croft appears to be our prime candidate." Within the hour, a digital forensics team descended upon the house. Their grim discovery, a meticulously concealed network of surveillance, 3 high-definition cameras and 2 sophisticated audio recording devices were unearthed. A discreet lens in the kitchen offered an unobstructed panorama of the very table where Alara, Liam, and Serafina had grappled with their difficult truths. Another, cleverly camouflaged in the living room, had captured every family gathering, every hushed debate, every unguarded moment for the past 2 months. "These installations are highly professional," the lead technician explained, his voice devoid of surprise. Someone with significant expertise. They gained entry under the guise of a standard maintenance visit. We found traces of a fabricated service call for cable repair, approximately 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. The time frame resonated with a chilling clarity. Precisely when Evelyn Croft would have understood her corporate subterfuge was being painstakingly unraveled. She had complete, unfettered access to your family's digital footprint, the specialist continued, displaying a cunningly installed keylogger program discovered on Liam's laptop. Every financial transfer, every email exchanged, every search query related to your personal circumstances. She saw it all. Liam stared at the illuminated screen, a stark horror contorting his features. Our bank records, our savings, our private discussions about remaining in the house, he choked out. She knew precisely how to calibrate her strikes, Alara added, her voice chillingly devoid of emotion. She knew the exact moment to deploy that fabricated Atherton call for maximum destabilization. Detective Harding concluded another hushed phone call, her gaze returning to the room. An update, she announced. Evelyn Croft vanished 3 days ago, coincidentally around the time of your property inspection. Her apartment has been vacated, her vehicle is gone, and she failed to report to her probation officer. Probation officer? Serafina echoed, bewilderment etched on her face. She was apprehended for employment fraud 2 weeks prior, but secured bail. She was mandated to stay within the jurisdiction while awaiting trial, but it appears she's chosen flight. Alara's mind raced, piecing together the intricate layers of deception, the psychological warfare, the weaponization of their most intimate family dynamics. Detective, is she operating solo? She inquired, her voice a low hum. We highly doubt it, Harding replied. The sheer sophistication involved strongly indicates this is merely a facet of a far broader criminal enterprise. We are now collaborating with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Marcus, who had been silently observing from his spot beside Clara on the sofa, now looked up, his young face etched with an earnest gravity that was uncannily reminiscent of Liam at the same age. "Grandma," he asked, his voice small, "does this mean the mean lady was tricking us about everything?" Alara knelt beside him, grappling with how to articulate such malice to an 8-year-old who had been unknowingly subjected to such invasive surveillance and calculated manipulation. Yes, sweet boy, she fabricated every detail. Her intention was to sow discord, to turn our family against itself. But we're not allowing that to happen, are we? Her gaze swept the room. Liam meticulously assisting the officers with evidence cataloging, Serafina holding Clara close, her own fear momentarily overshadowed by maternal instinct, the house itself violated but ultimately unbowed. "No," Alara affirmed, her voice resolute. "We are not fighting anymore. We are united." Just then, Detective Harding's phone vibrated, signaling news that would once again pivot the landscape of their crisis. "We've located Evelyn Croft," Detective Harding announced, severing the call. She was apprehended at a hotel in Boston, accompanied by 2 associates. They're arranging her extradition back to Hartford for intensive questioning. Liam, who had just begun to gather some scattered documents, looked up, his eyes meeting Alara's across the room. As Liam resumed aiding the officers with their sorting, he turned to me. "Does this mean it's finally over?" "The immediate threat to your family is indeed over," Detective Harding confirmed, her voice cutting through the lingering tension. "However, there's a much deeper narrative to uncover here than solely Evelyn Croft's involvement." She turned to a fresh page in her notepad. "During the apprehension, we uncovered that Evelyn Croft was operating as an integral part of a sophisticated property fraud ring. Their specific target demographic consists of elderly homeowners with substantial assets and, notably, complex family dynamics." "How many families have they managed to ensnare?" Serafina interjected, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and outrage. "At least 15 that we've documented across 3 states," Detective Harding replied. "All were older property owners, and all had adult children who had, at some point, provided access to sensitive financial information." Detective Harding's gaze then fixed directly on Alara. "Miss Vance, there's another critical piece of information you need to grasp. Evelyn Croft did not select your family at random." A wave of profound unease rippled through Alara. What precisely do you mean by that? 3 years ago, when you acquired the colonial residence on Sycamore Drive through Solstice Property Management, you engaged a commercial real estate broker to facilitate the transaction. That broker was Veronica Croft, Evelyn's sister. The room descended into an absolute stunned silence. Veronica Croft possessed intimate knowledge of your entire financial situation, your investment portfolio, your overall net worth, and your precise family arrangements, all because you meticulously disclosed this during the property purchase process. She knew you were acquiring this house specifically for Liam and Serafina, and she was fully apprised of the below-market lease agreement. Alara sank heavily into a kitchen chair, reeling from the staggering implications. Veronica has been systematically feeding information about our family to Evelyn for years. That is correct, Detective Harding affirmed. Veronica Croft declared personal bankruptcy 8 months ago, which coincided precisely with the inception of Evelyn's employment fraud at Atherton Financial. Driven by a desperate need for funds, the sisters made the calculated decision to exploit Veronica's client list for potential targets. Serafina was now staring at Alara, her expression a complex tableau of concern, dawning horror and disbelief. "Alara," she whispered, "this means they've been meticulously planning this for months, watching us, learning our routines, pinpointing our vulnerabilities." Detective Harding nodded grimly. Evelyn Croft exploited her position at Atherton Financial to gain unauthorized access to your employment records and other personal information. When she was exposed and realized her imminent dismissal, she and her sister drastically accelerated their timeline for the property fraud. Liam slowly shook his head, a look of profound, unsettling realization etched across his features. "So, the Christmas dinner calamity. Our treatment of you, Mother." "They were relying on our inherent family dysfunction," Alara completed for him, the bitter truth a searing burn. "They gambled that we would be fragmented enough to become ideal pawns in their elaborate scheme." "Precisely," Detective Harding confirmed. "They needed tangible evidence of family conflict to bolster their fabricated elder abuse allegations. The sophisticated surveillance equipment was meticulously collecting that evidence for months." Alara's mind flashed to Clara, her 6-year-old granddaughter, engaging innocently with Evelyn Croft during her deceptive neighborhood photography sessions. The violation now felt not merely personal, but deeply invasive to the tenderest parts of her family. "Detective," Alara stated, her voice carefully modulated, "what typically happens to families who fall prey to this kind of scheme?" "Generally, they end up losing their properties for a fraction of their market value, and their family relationships are often irrevocably damaged," the detective explained, her tone somber. "The victims frequently don't realize the extent of their manipulation until years later." Marcus tugged gently on Alara's sleeve, his young face earnest and grave. "Grandma, are the bad ladies going to stay in jail for a very, very long time?" "Yes, sweetheart," Alara reassured him, her voice thick with emotion. "They are going to prison for a very long time." Detective Harding began to pack away her equipment as the technical team finalized the documentation of the various surveillance devices. "Miss Vance, I must convey this," she said, her gaze holding a rare, understated admiration for Alara. "In my 20 years of investigating intricate fraud cases, I have never witnessed a family emerge from such an ordeal stronger than when they began." Serafina remained quiet for a prolonged moment. Then, her voice a fragile whisper, she asked the question Alara had been dreading since the initial discovery of the hidden cameras. "Alara, where does this leave us? With the house, with the agreements, with everything we've been trying to navigate?" Alara had been contemplating that exact query since the moment the surveillance equipment was brought to light. Everything they had endured, the stinging humiliation of Christmas dinner, the shocking revelations about the property, the tense contract negotiations, every single moment had been meticulously observed under Evelyn Croft's malevolent, watchful eye. She had deliberately banked on their family's disunity, betting that they would effectively tear themselves apart, thereby creating the perfectly chaotic conditions for her meticulously engineered fraud scheme. But we hadn't torn ourselves apart. Despite everything, months of manipulation, insidious surveillance, and immense psychological pressure, we'd begun to rediscover our way back to each other. I believe, I articulated slowly, my gaze sweeping over Liam and Serafina, that Evelyn Croft made a catastrophic miscalculation. "What do you mean, Mother?" Liam inquired, his voice still tinged with the exhaustion of the past few days. She presumed that financial duress and deeply held family secrets would inevitably fracture our relationships, I clarified. She was banking on us being too proud, too stubborn, too damaged to ever truly navigate our underlying issues. I looked around the kitchen, at these people I loved, who had been put through an ordeal no family should have to endure. But we did work through our problems. We held those uncomfortable, honest conversations. We made incredibly difficult choices. And crucially, we started the arduous process of rebuilding trust, respect, and love. Serafina's eyes were glistening with unshed tears, reflecting a profound sense of shared relief and vulnerability. "So what happens now?" she whispered, her voice fragile. I retrieved the 2 documents we'd been discussing just days prior, the renegotiated lease agreement and the option for them to purchase the house at market rate. These had represented such monumental, almost impossible choices. Now, however, their weight felt different. "Now," I declared, my voice steady, "we make decisions based on who we truly are, not on the fractured versions Evelyn Croft intended for us to become." With a deliberate motion, I tore up both contracts, the sharp ripping sound echoing in the hushed kitchen. "Alara!" Liam protested, half rising from his seat, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What on earth are you doing?" "I'm initiating a new beginning," I explained, letting the shredded papers fall to the table, with a completely clean slate and absolute unvarnished honesty. And then I told them what I had truly decided, a decision that had crystallized in my mind in the wake of Evelyn's capture. "I am gifting you this house free and clear. There will be no more rent, no more convoluted contracts, no more solstice property management. I am transferring the deed directly into your names." The silence that followed was profound, a vacuum of stunned disbelief. Serafina was the first to find her voice, though it was barely a breath. "Alara, we simply cannot accept that. It's too monumental a gesture." "You're not accepting it," I gently corrected, a small smile touching my lips. "You are receiving it. There is a very important distinction." "But Mom," Liam interjected, his voice raw with emotion, tears now openly tracing paths down his face. "After everything that has transpired, after the way we so unjustly treated you, because family is not about meticulously tallying wrongs," I stated, my gaze encompassing them both. "It is about loving each other unconditionally, even when we make profound mistakes, even when we falter." But I had one more essential truth to share with them before the full weight of my decision could truly settle. "There's something else," I said, rising and pulling them both into a heartfelt embrace, their initial shock giving way to a shared, tremulous comfort. Evelyn Croft, in her malicious machinations, inadvertently made me realize something incredibly important. She was entirely convinced that our family was too irreparably broken to withstand her calculated manipulation. She truly believed we would destroy ourselves, making her despicable job all the easier. I pulled back slightly, looking at both their tear-streaked faces, noting the raw honesty in their eyes. But we didn't destroy ourselves. We fought for each other. We chose love over misplaced pride, honesty over comfortable deceptions, and genuine connection over superficial control. We unequivocally proved that our family is infinitely stronger than any of her twisted schemes. Detective Harding, a faint smile playing on her lips, finished packing the last of her equipment. "The FBI will require formal statements from all of you over the next few weeks, but the criminal case against Evelyn and Veronica Croft is unassailable. You will very likely be asked to testify at their trial." "What about the other families they targeted?" Serafina asked, her voice reflecting a newfound empathy. "With the irrefutable evidence from your case," Detective Harding replied, "we've been able to contact 12 other families and alert them to the specifics of the scheme. Several fraudulent property transfers have already been halted, and we are actively working with the victims to help them recover their substantial losses." After the police and forensic teams finally departed, we sat in the quiet kitchen, trying to process the dizzying cascade of events. The house felt profoundly different now, not violated, but truly reclaimed. The hidden surveillance equipment was gone, the locks had been changed, and for the first time in months, we were truly alone as a family, without an invisible audience. "I can scarcely believe we almost lost each other over something that wasn't even real," Liam said quietly, his gaze fixed on the now empty space where the cameras had been concealed. "But we didn't lose each other, Liam," Serafina countered, her voice firm, a newfound resilience in her tone. "Even when we thought Alara was testing us, even when we were consumed by anger and confusion, we still ultimately chose to work things out." Marcus, who had been silently coloring at the table, looked up, his young face earnest and full of hope. "Grandma," he asked, his voice small, "does this mean you'll come to our house for dinner every Sunday?" "If you genuinely want me to, sweet boy," I responded, my voice thick with emotion. "And Christmas too?" Clara chimed in, her 6-year-old eyes wide. I looked at Serafina, who was nodding through her tears, a genuine smile replacing her earlier apprehension. "Especially Christmas," I affirmed, "and every holiday thereafter." "And you're truly giving us the house?" Clara asked, her young mind still grappling with the monumental concept. "It was always destined to be your house, sweetheart," I reassured her, reaching out to gently squeeze her hand. "I simply needed to make certain that your parents fully understood the immeasurable value of family." Serafina wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "What happens now?" she inquired, her voice a mix of wonder and practicality. "I mean, practically speaking, what is our next step?" "Practically speaking," I began, my gaze lingering on them, my beloved son and daughter-in-law, now united in their new reality. "You call your lawyer tomorrow, and we begin the process of transferring the deed. It's a formality now, a testament to what we've overcome and what we've chosen to become. You will immediately engage your legal counsel to formally commence the transfer of the deed. Concurrently, you will meticulously overhaul all your digital passwords and upgrade your entire security infrastructure, installing advanced locks and perhaps a sophisticated camera system that you control completely." I paused, considering the larger tableau before continuing. "And with that, we embark on a new chapter as a family. No more concealed arrangements, no more subtle tests of loyalty, no more conditional affection contingent on circumstance. We will construct something that is fundamentally honest, unequivocally strong, and truly authentic." Liam's shoulders began to tremble, and he openly wept once more. But these were tears of profound, overwhelming gratitude, devoid of the crushing weight of guilt or lingering confusion. "Mother," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion, "I need you to truly understand this. Even before we stumbled upon the truth about the fraud, even when we believed you were deliberately testing us, Serafina and I had already made a solemn pact. We wanted to work harder, to truly become the family you deserved. And Liam, there's something equally vital I need you to know," I replied, my own voice softening, a warmth spreading through me. "Even when my heart ached with anger, even when I felt pushed aside and unvalued, my love for you never wavered. I never relinquished the hope that we would ultimately rediscover our way back to each other." Half a year later, the comforting scent of pine and roasted turkey filled the familiar dining room, the very space where, not so long ago, I had been relegated to the periphery, a silent observer of my own family's festive indifference. But this time, the narrative was starkly different. I presided at the head of the polished oak table, meticulously carving the golden brown turkey I had brought to share, a gesture of connection rather than mere contribution. Serafina, her earlier apprehension replaced by a genuine warmth, proudly presented her renowned sage and apple stuffing. Liam, his presence now grounded and attentive, skillfully navigated Marcus and Clara's boundless excitement over their eagerly awaited presence. The house resonated with a symphony of laughter, lively conversation, and the undeniable harmony of a family that had not merely endured, but had fiercely fought for each other and unequivocally triumphed. Evelyn and Veronica Croft, the architects of such cruel deception, were now serving federal sentences for their roles in an elaborate, organized fraud ring. Our family's ordeal had, in fact, become a pivotal case study, instrumental in the FBI's development of new strategies for identifying and prosecuting similar nationwide schemes. Through their efforts, a dozen other families, vulnerable and manipulated, had been contacted and were actively being guided toward recovering their substantial losses. Yet the true measure of victory wasn't found in legal precedents or courtroom triumphs. It resonated here, within these very walls, among these people who had profoundly learned that love transcends material provision or receipt. It is about unwavering presence, genuine attentiveness, and the conscious daily choice to embrace one another. As I watched Marcus and Clara, now beaming, tear into their Christmas presents with the unbridled enthusiasm of an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, a profound realization settled upon me. Sometimes, the most precious gifts are those you come closest to losing. The unbreakable bond of family, the foundational bedrock of trust, the grace of second chances, and the sanctuary of home. The gifts that truly matter are invariably bestowed without cost. And occasionally, when malevolent forces attempt to dismantle what you hold dear, they inadvertently reveal the extraordinary inherent strength of those very foundations.